The email arrived at 3 a.m. in Singapore, carrying news that made my coffee go cold. Your brother Marcus has claimed sole ownership of Grandma Rose's Victorian mansion. I stared at my laptop screen, my hands trembling. After 15 years abroad, building my architectural career, I was about to discover that the old house held secrets deeper than its 100-year-old foundations, secrets that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family's legacy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn rain pelted against the airplane window as we made our final descent into Boston Logan International. Even through the gray weather, I could make out the familiar coastline where I'd spent countless summers at my grandparents' historic Victorian home in Marblehead. 15 years of memories rushed back. The creaking wooden stairs, the secret reading nook beneath the window seat, the smell of Grandma Rose's lavender gardens. Now, at 38, I was returning not as a visitor, but as someone fighting for their inheritance. Ms. Eleanor Montgomery? The flight attendant's voice pulled me from my reverie. We'll be landing in 10 minutes. I nodded, straightening my blazer, a habit from years of client presentations at Singapore's top architectural firm. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my career designing modern homes across Asia, while the one historic house that meant everything to me was slipping through my fingers. My phone buzzed with another message from my cousin Rachel. Marcus is already moving his things in. He's claiming Grandma Rose explicitly left him the house. Says he has documentation. You need to get here fast. The familiar skyline emerged through the clouds as we landed. This wasn't how I'd imagined my homecoming. I'd always planned to return triumphantly, maybe start my own firm here, make my grandparents proud. Instead, I was racing against time to prevent my younger brother from claiming our family's heritage for himself. The taxi ride from the airport gave me time to reflect on the events that had led to this moment. Grandma Rose had passed away 3 months ago. I'd been in the middle of a crucial project in Singapore, a sustainable housing development that could have secured my partnership. The firm had denied my emergency leave request, citing contract obligations. By the time I'd arranged to transfer my responsibilities and book a flight, the funeral was over. Your grandmother would have understood, Marcus had assured me during our video call. She knew how important your career was to you. His words had comforted me then. Now they felt calculated, part of a larger plan I hadn't seen coming. The taxi turned onto Marble Street, and my heart clenched. There it stood, the Montgomery Manor, a 3-story Victorian masterpiece with its distinctive turret and wraparound porch. Grandpa William had spent decades restoring every detail, teaching us about architecture and craftsmanship along the way. He'd inspired my career choice, showing me how buildings could tell stories, hold histories, shape lives. Rachel was waiting on the front steps, her red hair bright against the gray day. She rushed to help me with my luggage, her face tight with worry. Thank God you're here, Ellie. Things are worse than I thought. What do you mean? Where's Marcus? At the lawyer's office, finalizing paperwork. He claims Grandma Rose left him a revised deed during her final weeks. Says she wanted the house to stay in the family, with someone who'd actually be here to care for it. Rachel's voice caught. He's using your absence against you. We stepped into the foyer, and the familiar scent of lemon oil and old wood wrapped around me. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. The antique mirror where Grandma used to check her hat before church, the grandfather clock that never quite kept the right time, the wall of family photos chronicling generations of Montgomerys. My eyes caught on a new addition to the photo wall, a recent picture of Marcus standing with Grandma Rose in her garden. They were both smiling, but something about their posture, the way the photo was prominently displayed, felt staged. He's been methodically planning this, Rachel said, following my gaze. Ever since you took the job in Singapore, He's been positioning himself as the dedicated grandson, the one who stayed, the one who cared. I set my bag down, anger and guilt warring in my chest. That's not fair. I built my career from nothing, worked my way up in one of the most competitive markets in the world. Grandma Rose always supported my dreams. I know that. Rachel touched my arm. But Marcus has spent years crafting a different narrative, and now he claims to have legal documents to back it up. I walked into the living room, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The afternoon light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the oriental rug. Another piece of family history. Every corner of this house held memories, lessons, love. There's something else, Rachel said quietly. Something odd I noticed when helping. Grandma rose with her papers last year, but we should probably discuss it over tea. You look exhausted. As Rachel disappeared into the kitchen, I sank into Grandpa William's old leather armchair. The weight of jet lag and emotion pressed down on me. I'd traveled 7,000 miles to fight for my inheritance, but I was beginning to realize this. Battle wasn't just about property. It was about family, truth, and the stories we tell ourselves about who deserves to keep history alive. The grandfather clock chimed 4, its familiar off-key tone echoing through the house. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked, as if the old house itself was acknowledging my return. I closed my eyes, remembering Grandma Rose's last words to me during our final video call. Sometimes, darling, the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight. I hadn't understood her meaning then. But as Rachel returned with a tea tray and a determined look in her eyes, I had a feeling I was about to find out. Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she poured the Earl Grey into Grandma Rose's antique Wedgwood teacups. The familiar scent of bergamot filled the air, momentarily transporting me back to countless afternoon teas spent listening to our grandmother's stories about the house's history. But this time, Rachel's revelation would change everything I thought I knew about our family's legacy. Last spring, while helping Grandma organize her study, Rachel began, carefully setting down the teapot. I found something unusual in her desk, a series of letters between her and Grandpa William, dated just before his passing 7 years ago. They discussed something called the Montgomery Trust. I leaned forward, my jet lag forgotten. A trust? I've never heard of it. Neither had I, but that's not the strangest part. Rachel reached into her messenger bag and pulled out a worn leather journal. This was hidden behind the loose panel in the library's window seat. Your old reading spot. I found it last week while looking for Grandma's old photo albums. The journal's cover bore our grandfather's distinctive handwriting. Property Notes and Observations, 1975-2018. My hands shook as I opened it, recognizing the precise architectural sketches and meticulous notes that had inspired my own career path. Look at the last entry, Rachel urged, pointing to a page dated just 2 weeks before Grandpa William's death. The normally steady handwriting was shakier, but the words were clear. The true deed lies where the morning light first touches. The past, Rose knows. The house must stay whole. It's like a riddle, I murmured, studying the cryptic message. But what does it mean about the house staying whole? Before Rachel could respond, the front door opened. Heavy footsteps echoed through the foyer, followed by a familiar voice that had grown colder over the years. Well, well, the prodigal sister returns. Marcus stood in the doorway, his 6-foot frame filling the space with an authority he'd never possessed in our younger years. At 35, he looked more like our father than ever, the same steel-gray eyes and commanding presence. His designer suit and carefully styled hair spoke of success, but there was something new in his bearing, a sense of ownership that made my skin crawl. Hello, Marcus, I said, rising to meet him on equal footing. I hear congratulations are in order. You've been busy while I was away. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Someone had to take responsibility for our family's heritage, Ellie. While you were off chasing your dreams in Asia, I was here, making sure Grandma Rose was cared for, ensuring the house didn't fall into disrepair. And now you're claiming it's all yours? I kept my voice level, though anger simmered beneath the surface. Based on some last-minute changes to the deed? Marcus walked to the antique sideboard, running his fingers along the polished mahogany as if marking his territory. Grandma made her wishes clear. She wanted the house to remain in capable hands, someone who understood its value, who would be present to preserve it. And you think that's you? I stepped closer, noting how he subtly shifted away from the window seat where Rachel had found the journal. The brother who used to complain about how outdated and impractical this place was? Who wanted to sell it and buy a modern condo downtown? People change, Ellie. His tone sharpened. 15 years is a long time. Long enough to appreciate what really matters. Long enough for Grandma to realize who truly deserved her legacy. Rachel cleared her throat, reminding us of her presence. Marcus, there might be more to consider here. Grandpa William left some documents. Grandpa's been gone for 7 years, Marcus cut her off. His wishes are irrelevant now. I have a legally binding deed, signed by Grandma Rose 3 months ago, witnessed by her lawyer. The house is mine. He turned to me, his expression softening slightly. You're welcome to stay for a few days. Of course, for old time's sake. But after that, I expect you'll need to head back to your life in Singapore. The grandfather clock chimed again, its off-key tone now seeming like a warning. I met Marcus's gaze steadily. Actually, I've taken an extended leave of absence. I think it's time I came home for a while. After all, this house holds so many secrets. Memories. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Concern? Fear? Before his mask of confidence returned. Suit yourself. But don't waste your time looking for loopholes, Ellie. Everything's been properly documented and filed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the Historical Society about preservation grants. As his footsteps faded away, Rachel and I exchanged looks. He's nervous, she whispered. Did you see how he reacted when I mentioned Grandpa's documents? I nodded, picking up the journal again, and he specifically avoided looking at this window seat. Marcus was never good at hiding things. Remember how Grandma Rose always said he had a tell when he was bluffing at poker? So, what's our next move? I traced Grandpa William's last written words with my finger. Where the morning light first touches the past. After 15 years of designing modern buildings in Singapore, I'd finally found a mystery worthy of my architectural expertise. We start at dawn, I decided. If Grandpa left us a clue about the true deed, it has something to do with how light moves through this house. And there's no one better qualified to solve an architectural puzzle than someone who designs buildings. For a living. Rachel smiled, her first genuine smile since I'd arrived. Welcome home, Ellie. I have a feeling this is going to be interesting. Looking around the room where we'd spent so many happy moments, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about claiming ownership anymore. It was about uncovering the truth our grandparents had carefully preserved for the right moment. Marcus might have legal documents on his side, but I had something more valuable. The skills. Grandpa William had inspired me to develop, and the deep understanding of this house that came from loving every inch of it since childhood. The game was on, and I intended to win. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The pre-dawn hours cast long shadows through Montgomery Manor as I positioned myself in the grand foyer, architectural sketching pad in hand. After a restless night studying Grandpa William's journal, I had developed a theory about his cryptic message. Years of analyzing building designs in Singapore had taught me that understanding light patterns was crucial to unlocking a structure's secrets. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel whispered, handing me a fresh cup of coffee. She had insisted on arriving at 5 a.m. to help, despite having to work at the university library later that morning. "Grandpa William was methodical in everything he did," I replied, reviewing my preliminary sketches of the house's east-facing windows. "If he left a clue about where the true deed is hidden, it would be based on precise calculations, not chance." The first rays of sunlight began to pierce the darkness, and I watched intently as they filtered through the foyer's stained glass transom. The light created a pattern on the opposite wall, illuminating the family portraits in sequence. But something about the arrangement caught my attention. "Rachel, look at this." I approached the wall, studying the way the morning light played across the frames. "Notice anything unusual about how these photos are hung?" She joined me, frowning. "They've always been arranged chronologically, starting with our great-great-grandparents." "Exactly. But look at the spacing between the frames. It's irregular." I ran my finger along the wall, measuring the gaps. Any curator would arrange these symmetrically, but these spaces follow a pattern. Before I could elaborate, the sound of footsteps on the upper landing made us both freeze. Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs, already dressed in an expensive suit despite the early hour. "An architectural investigation before breakfast?" His tone was light, but his eyes were sharp. "I hope you're not planning any unauthorized renovations to my property." "Just admiring Grandpa's attention to detail," I replied smoothly. "You know how he loved precision in everything he did." Marcus descended the stairs, each step deliberate. "Yes, well, some of us learned to appreciate his traditional values while others ran off to build glass and steel monstrosities in Asia." The barb stung, but I refused to let it show. "Interesting perspective from someone who used to call this place a museum piece. Tell me, Marcus, when did you develop such passion for historical preservation?" "People change, Ellie." Speaking of change, I've scheduled an appointment with Harrison and Associates this afternoon. They're the top property law firm in Boston. He adjusted his tie with practiced nonchalance. "Just to ensure all the paperwork is properly filed, you understand. We wouldn't want any complications." The implied threat was clear, but it only strengthened my resolve. "Of course not. Though I imagine Grandma Rose's final wishes might be more complicated than a single revised deed." Something flickered across Marcus's face. The same tell I'd noticed yesterday. "Grandma's wishes were clear. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have meetings to attend." After he left, Rachel released a breath she'd been holding. "He's definitely nervous about something. Did you see how he reacted when you mentioned Grandma's wishes?" I nodded, turning back to the wall of photos. "Help me measure these spaces." "Precisely. There's a pattern here, and I think it's connected to something bigger." For the next hour, we documented every measurement, every angle of light. The sun climbed higher, transforming the initial patterns, but I'd seen enough to confirm my suspicion. "Look at this." I showed Rachel my notebook where I'd mapped out the spacing measurements. "These numbers, they're not random. They correspond to dates, specific years in our family's history." Rachel's eyes widened as she studied the pattern. "And the largest gap falls between 1975 and 1976, I finished. The year Grandpa William bought this house and began its restoration. Before we could discuss further, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. My breath caught as I read the sender's name, William Montgomery III. "It's from Grandpa's old email account," I whispered, hands shaking slightly. "Scheduled to be sent?" "Automatically, dated for exactly 1 week after someone filed new property paperwork on the house." Rachel leaned in close as I opened the message. Inside was a single sentence. "The truth rises with the sun, but wisdom waited for the perfect moment to shine light on its face." "Another riddle," Rachel groaned. Why couldn't Grandpa just leave straightforward instructions? But I was already moving, excitement building as pieces clicked into place. He did, for someone who knows how to read them. The rising sun, the photo arrangement, this email. They're all part of a bigger picture. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd found in Grandpa's journal. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. Montgomery Historical Society, Catherine speaking. Catherine, this is Eleanor Montgomery, William's granddaughter. I need to know everything you have about the original property plans for Montgomery Manor, specifically any modifications made in 1975. There was a pause on the line. Eleanor? My goodness, it's been years. Your grandfather. He left something for you here. Said I should only release it when the time was right. My heart raced. And when is the right time? His instructions were specific. When his grandchild returns to solve the mystery of the morning light. Catherine's voice softened. I'd say that time is now, wouldn't you? As I ended the call, Rachel was staring at me with a mixture of hope and confusion. What did Grandpa leave at the Historical Society? We'll find out this afternoon, I replied, gathering my notes. But first, we need to understand exactly what Marcus has been doing with his lawyers. Something tells me William anticipated this entire situation, and he left us breadcrumbs to follow. The morning sun had fully illuminated the foyer now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd only begun to uncover what was hidden in its light. Somewhere in this house, between the careful measurements and cryptic messages, lay the truth about our family's legacy, and I was determined to bring it into the light. The Marblehead Historical Society building stood as a testament to colonial architecture, its red brick facade and white trim pristine against the afternoon sky. As Rachel and I climbed the granite steps, I couldn't help but appreciate the historical preservation that had maintained its authentic character, the kind of dedication Grandpa William had always admired. Catherine Reynolds, the Society's head archivist, met us in the marble-floored lobby. At 75, she carried herself with the dignified air of someone who had spent decades protecting historical treasures. Her silver hair was pulled back, in a neat bun, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence behind wire-rimmed glasses. Eleanor Montgomery, she said warmly, extending her hand. You look just like your grandfather when he was deep in research, that same focused expression. She turned to Rachel. And Rachel, dear, how are your doctoral studies in American history progressing? Almost finished with my dissertation, Rachel replied. Though recent events have added some unexpected research opportunities. Catherine led us through the Society's main hall, past glass cases displaying artifacts from Marblehead's maritime history. Your grandfather was one of our most dedicated supporters, she explained as we walked. He understood that preserving history wasn't just about maintaining old buildings, it was about protecting the stories and truths they contained. We entered her office, a wood-paneled room lined with filing cabinets and architectural drawings. Catherine closed the door and moved to an old safe mounted in the wall. William left this with explicit instructions, she said, working the combination. It was to be opened only when his grandchild returned seeking answers about the morning light. The safe door swung open with a soft creak. Catherine removed a sealed envelope and a leather portfolio, both bearing Grandpa William's distinctive handwriting. He added one more condition, she added, holding the items just out of reach. I need to verify something first. Tell me, Eleanor, what did the morning light reveal? I thought carefully about our discovery. The family portraits, their spacing corresponds to significant dates in our family's history. The largest gap marks 1975, when Grandpa William bought Montgomery Manor. Catherine's face softened with approval. And what did you learn from your architectural training about the significance of morning light in historical buildings? Eastern light was considered sacred in colonial architecture, I replied, drawing on my professional knowledge. Many, Houses from that era were designed to capture the first light in specific ways, often to illuminate important features or create symbolic patterns. Just like your grandfather, Catherine smiled, finally handing over the items. Always testing, always teaching, even from beyond. The envelope contained a letter, dated 7 years ago. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then Marcus has made his move to claim sole ownership of Montgomery Manor. I anticipated this possibility, knowing how the promise of property can reveal both the best and worst in people. What Marcus doesn't understand, what I hoped he would learn, is that our house is more than just a valuable piece of real estate. It's a repository of our family's history, a testament to the principles of preservation and protection that have guided the Montgomerys for generations. The morning light revelation you discovered is just the beginning. The portfolio I've left with Catherine contains the original architectural plans for Montgomery Manor, including modifications I made in 1975. Study them carefully. Pay special attention to the eastern windows and what lies between the walls. But be warned, Marcus may have legal documents supporting his claim, but he doesn't possess the full truth. The real property deed exists in duplicate, and only one version tells the complete story of the Montgomery Trust. Time is critical now. Harrison & Associates are not just property lawyers. They're known for expediting historical property conversions. I fear Marcus plans to do more than just claim ownership. You chose to pursue architecture in Singapore, to build new dreams, in distant lands. I've always been proud of your courage to forge your own path. Now it's time to use everything you've learned to protect our family's legacy. The truth, like the morning light, reveals itself to those who know where to look. With love and faith in your abilities, Grandpa William. My hands trembled as I opened the portfolio. Inside were the original blueprints of Montgomery Manor, meticulously detailed and annotated in my grandfather's hand. But these weren't just architectural drawings, they were a map to something bigger. There's more, Catherine said, pulling out a leather-bound volume from her desk. Your grandfather contributed extensively to our oral history project. He recorded everything about the house's restoration, including some rather interesting details about hidden spaces and modified structures. Rachel leaned forward. Hidden spaces? Many colonial homes had secret rooms or compartments, I explained. My professional interest piqued. They were used during the Revolutionary War, the Underground Railroad. Grandpa William once mentioned that Montgomery Manor had its own secrets, but I always thought he was just trying to spark my interest in architecture. William was many things, Catherine said carefully. But he was never one for idle stories. Everything he did had purpose. She checked her watch. The society closes in an hour, but I can give you access to our research room. William's oral histories are archived there, along with all the documentation about the house's historical status. As Catherine led us to the research room, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Meeting with lawyers went well. Conversion permits are being expedited. Hope you're enjoying your walk down memory lane. Rachel read the message over my shoulder. Conversion permits? He can't be planning to. Convert the manor into luxury condos, I finished grimly. That's why he needs full ownership rights. A historical property like this would be worth millions if developed. We spent the next hour poring over Grandpa William's oral histories, architectural notes, and historical documentation. Each page revealed new layers to his plan, new pieces of the puzzle he'd left for us to solve. Eleanor, Catherine said, softly as closing time approached, your grandfather believed that some things are worth more than money, that our heritage, properly preserved, can guide future generations. He chose you as the guardian of that legacy long ago. He just waited for the right moment to tell you. Standing in that room surrounded by the weight of history, I felt the full responsibility of what Grandpa William had entrusted to me. This wasn't just about preventing Marcus from selling our family home. It was about protecting something larger, a legacy of preservation, integrity, and faith in the power of truth to emerge in its own time. As we left the historical society, the setting sun painted the brick buildings of Marblehead in shades of gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, I had what I needed. A map to the truth, drawn by the one person who had always believed in my ability to find it. The grandfather clock struck midnight as Rachel and I spread the architectural plans across the manor's dining room table. After hours of studying Grandpa William's oral histories at the Historical Society, we had returned home with a clearer understanding of what we were looking for, though finding it would prove to be another challenge entirely. "Look at these annotations," I said, tracing my finger along the blueprint's eastern wall. Grandpa modified the original colonial structure in 1975, but he maintained all the historical elements. The building inspector's report shows he added a secondary wall system throughout the east wing, supposedly for improved insulation. Rachel adjusted her reading glasses, leaning closer to examine the detailed drawings. A wall within a wall? That seems excessive for mere insulation. Exactly. I pulled out my laptop, opening the 3D modeling software I used for my architectural projects in Singapore. In colonial architecture, double wall systems were sometimes used to hide structural supports, but these modifications are different. See how the space between the walls varies at specific points? As I began creating a digital model of the house's eastern section, my phone illuminated with an incoming call. The number belonged to Harrison and Associates, Marcus's lawyers. I let it go to voicemail, but moments later, an email arrived. "Dear Ms. Montgomery, our firm represents Marcus Montgomery regarding the ownership transfer of 247 Harbor Street, Marblehead, Montgomery Manor. We understand you may have concerns about recent property arrangements. Please be advised that any interference with the legally documented transfer of ownership could result in civil action. A courtesy copy of the revised deed, signed by Rose Montgomery on March 15, 2025, is attached for your records. We strongly recommend you seek independent legal counsel before pursuing any challenges to this document. Regards, James Harrison, Esques." "Open the attachment," Rachel urged, her historian's curiosity evident. "Maybe there's something we missed." The PDF contained a perfectly ordinary-looking deed, complete with Grandma Rose's signature and proper notarization. But as I zoomed in on the document details, something caught my eye. "The notary stamp," I murmured, comparing it to the images we'd found in the Historical Society's archives. "It's from the same notary who handled property transactions for the Montgomery Trust in 1975. That can't be a coincidence." Rachel's eyes widened. "Catherine mentioned that notary in the oral histories. What was her name? Elizabeth Blackwood?" "Still practicing law at 85, I confirmed, quickly searching online. "And according to the state registry, she specializes in historical property trusts. Her office is right here in Marblehead." A sudden noise from upstairs made us both jump. Footsteps crossed the floor above, followed by the sound of Marcus's voice engaged in a late-night phone call. "Yes, I understand the development timeline is aggressive," he was saying, his words carrying clearly through the old house's heating vents. "But once the ownership transfer is complete, we can begin the conversion process immediately. The historical designation won't be an issue. I have documentation showing the property was removed from protected status." Rachel and I exchanged alarmed looks. "Removed from protected status? That shouldn't be possible without extensive public hearings and documentation." "We need to work faster," I whispered, turning back to my 3D model. "These wall modifications, the varying spaces, they're not random. Grandpa was an engineer before he became a preservationist. Everything he designed had a purpose." Working through the night, I meticulously mapped every measurement, every unusual feature noted in the blueprints. As the 3D model took shape, A pattern emerged. The spaces between the walls aligned perfectly with key structural points throughout the house, creating a hidden network that seemed to converge at a single location. The morning room, I breathed, the realization hitting me. The small sitting room off the library, where Grandma Rose had taken her morning tea for 40 years, watching the sun rise over the harbor. That's where the pattern leads. Rachel checked her watch. It's almost dawn. If we're going to investigate, it needs to be now, before Marcus wakes up. We made our way quietly through the sleeping house, our flashlights casting long shadows across the familiar halls. The morning room was exactly as Grandma Rose had left it. Delicate teacups still arranged on the shelf, her favorite shawl draped over the window seat. Using my architectural training, I examined every inch of the room's eastern wall, looking for signs of the modifications shown in the blueprints. Finally, behind a loose panel of crown molding, I found what we were seeking: a small lever, practically invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. "Should we?" Rachel whispered, glancing nervously at the door. I thought of Grandpa William's letter, his faith in my ability to understand the clues he'd left. With a deep breath, I pulled the lever. A soft click echoed through the room, followed by the whisper of old mechanisms coming to life. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the horizon, a section of the wall panel slowly swung open, revealing a space that had waited 50 years to share its secrets. Inside, illuminated by the growing morning light, was a sight that made my architectural heart skip a beat: a complete set of original property documents, architectural drawings, and most importantly, a leather folder stamped with the words, "Montgomery Trust, Complete Deed and Covenants, 1975. But what caught my eye wasn't the documents themselves. It was the small brass plaque mounted beside them, engraved with words that brought tears to my eyes. For Eleanor, who learned to see not just the structures we build, but the truths they protect. The morning light reveals all things in time. Grandpa William. This was what he had prepared for, what he had trusted me to find. Not just the legal documents that could challenge Marcus's claim, but a testament to the real meaning of preservation, protecting not just buildings, but the principles they were built upon. As I reached for the folder, a floorboard creaked behind us. "I wondered how long it would take you to find it," a familiar voice said. We turned to find Marcus standing in the doorway, his face unreadable in the dawn light. "Though I have to admit, I never expected you to solve it quite so quickly." Marcus stepped into the morning room, his silhouette framed by the rising sun. In the growing light, I noticed something unexpected in his expression. Not anger or frustration, but a complex mixture of resignation and relief. "Did you know about this?" I asked, gesturing to the hidden compartment and its contents. The leather folder felt heavy in my hands, weighted with decades of family history. "Not exactly," Marcus replied, moving to stand by Grandma Rose's favorite chair. "I knew Grandpa William had protected the house somehow. That's why I've been working so hard to push through the ownership transfer before anyone could discover the full truth." Rachel shifted closer to me, her voice tense. "The development, plans, the rushed legal proceedings. You were trying to beat a deadline." "The trust becomes irrevocable in 3 days," Marcus confirmed, surprising us with his candor. "On the 50th anniversary of Grandpa's purchase of the property. Once that happens, the house can never be sold or developed. It has to remain a single-family residence, preserved in its historical state." I opened the leather folder, scanning the trust documents within. The legal language was complex, but the intent was clear. "Grandpa William didn't just buy a house in 1975, I said slowly. He created a living testament to preservation. The Montgomery Trust was designed to protect not just the building, but everything it represents." "And that's exactly the problem," Marcus responded, an edge entering his voice. Do you have any idea what this property is worth? The development potential alone. We could all be set for life. Instead, Grandpa's idealistic vision locks away millions in potential value. I thought of my years in Singapore, designing gleaming towers that transformed skylines. Some things are worth more than their development potential, Marcus. You used to understand that. Did I? He laughed without humor. Or was I just the one left behind to deal with the practical realities while you pursued your dreams? Do you know how many offers I've had to turn away? How many developers have tried to convince me to sell? So this was never about preserving Grandma Rose's wishes, Rachel interjected. The revised deed, the lawyers' meetings, it was all about beating the trust's deadline. Marcus ran his hand along the antique wallpaper, a gesture so reminiscent of our grandfather that it made my heart ache. I thought if I could transfer ownership before the 50-year mark, there might be a way around the trust's restrictions. The developers were willing to pay a premium for quick closure. And what about the family legacy? I asked, moving to stand beside him. The history Grandpa William protected? The memories this house holds? Legacy doesn't pay property. Taxes, Marcus snapped. It doesn't fund maintenance on a historic structure, or cover the costs of historical compliance. While you were building modern marvels in Asia, I was here watching our family's finances drain away maintaining this museum. Peace. But there was something in his voice, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. I glanced at the trust documents again, noting a detail I'd missed earlier. The Montgomery Trust includes a maintenance endowment, I said quietly. Grandpa, William didn't just protect the house, he provided for its future. There's a separate account, untouched for 50 years, specifically for preservation and upkeep. Marcus's face went still. What? I handed him the relevant pages. He knew the financial burden of maintaining a historical property. The trust isn't just restrictions, it's resources. Resources that become available once the trust becomes irrevocable. Rachel leaned in to read over his shoulder. The endowment has been accumulating interest for 50 years, according to these figures. It's more than enough, Marcus finished, his voice hollow. More than what the developers offered. He sank into Grandma Rose's chair, the papers trembling slightly in his hands. All this time, I thought I was protecting our financial interests, making the practical choice. But Grandpa William had already solved the problem. The morning sun had fully illuminated the room now, casting everything in clear, unforgiving light. I watched my brother's face as the implications of his actions settled over him. I've made a mess of things, haven't I? He finally said, looking up at me. The lawyers, the development plans, the rushed deed transfer. I nearly destroyed. Exactly what Grandpa William worked so hard to protect. And for what? A quick profit that would have paled in comparison to his actual provision for the house's future. It's not too late, I offered, thinking of all the architectural projects I'd seen saved from demolition at the last moment. The trust doesn't become irrevocable for 3 more days. We can still honor Grandpa's vision. Together. Marcus stood slowly, straightening his shoulders. The developer's contract has a clause allowing withdrawal if any pre-existing legal constraints are discovered. The trust documents would certainly qualify. He managed a small, self-deprecating smile. I suppose my legal thoroughness finally worked in the house's favor. Rachel touched his arm gently. You know what this means, though. Once the trust activates, the house's status becomes permanent. No development, no conversion, no sale. No breaking up the family legacy, I added, watching my brother carefully. Marcus walked to the window, gazing out at the harbor view our grandparents had cherished. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, he said quietly. Some things really are worth more than their market value. The grandfather clock chimed in the hall, its familiar tone echoing through the house that had seen generations of Montgomery triumphs and failures, conflicts and reconciliations. In the morning light, surrounded by the evidence of our grandfather's foresight and faith, we had found something more valuable than property rights or development potential. We had rediscovered the true meaning of inheritance, not just the transfer of assets, but the preservation of principles that defined a family's character across generations. The afternoon sun streamed through the library windows as Marcus, Rachel, and I gathered around the massive oak table that had hosted countless family discussions. Elizabeth Blackwood, the notary from 1975, sat with us, her decades of legal experience evident in her precise movements as she reviewed the trust documents. William Montgomery was extraordinarily thorough, she noted, adjusting her reading glasses. The trust structure he created is remarkably sophisticated for its time. The endowment alone demonstrates remarkable foresight. He anticipated inflation, maintenance costs, even potential changes in preservation requirements. I studied the financial projections my architectural software had generated based on the trust's provisions. The endowment should cover maintenance and preservation costs for at least another 50 years, assuming standard appreciation rates. But there's a condition attached to accessing those funds, Marcus added, pointing to a specific clause. The house must be actively utilized as a family residence, not just maintained as a museum piece. Someone has to actually live here and engage with the property's historical significance. Elizabeth nodded approvingly. That was always William's vision. He believed historical preservation wasn't just about maintaining buildings. It was about keeping their stories alive through active use and appreciation. Rachel, who had been examining the original property surveys, looked up suddenly. There's something else here. The trust doesn't just cover the main house, it includes provisions for the carriage house at the back of the property. I moved to examine the documents she indicated. The carriage house had been boarded up for years, used mainly for storage, but according to the trust specifications, it had potential that Grandpa William had clearly recognized. He included architectural plans for converting the carriage house into a historical research center, I said, spreading out the blueprints. Look at these designs: reading rooms, archive space, even accommodation for a resident scholar. He envisioned the entire property as a living center for historical preservation. Marcus whistled softly. That would require significant renovation. Work. The carriage house hasn't been properly maintained in decades. Actually, I replied, my professional training kicking in as I examined the plans. The basic structure is still sound. I did a preliminary assessment yesterday. The main improvements would involve updating systems and restoring original features. With proper architectural oversight, we could maintain historical authenticity while creating a functional modern space. Elizabeth smiled. That brings us to another aspect of William's plan. The trust includes a specific role for an architectural preservation specialist, someone with both the technical expertise and the family connection to oversee the property's ongoing maintenance and development. All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight of their expectations, but also a surge of excitement. This was an opportunity to combine my professional skills with our family's legacy in a way I'd never imagined. The timing is perfect, Rachel observed. Your firm in Singapore was planning to open a Boston office anyway. This could be your chance to establish an East Coast presence while overseeing the trust's implementation. Marcus leaned forward, his business acumen evident. The Historical Research Center could generate revenue through grants and educational programs. Combined with the endowment, it could make the property not just self-sustaining, but actively beneficial to the community. That's exactly what your grandfather intended, Elizabeth confirmed. He saw the Montgomery property as a bridge between past and future, tradition and innovation. But he knew it would take the right combination of skills and commitment to realize that vision. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the carriage house beyond the formal gardens. Years of working on modern developments in Asia had taught me the importance of respecting historical context while embracing necessary evolution. This project would require all of that knowledge and more. There's something else we should consider, I said, turning back to the group. The Historical Research Center could partner with Rachel's university. Her expertise in American history would be invaluable in developing educational programs. Rachel's eyes lit up. I could potentially base my postdoctoral research here. The university has been looking for partnerships with historical properties for their public history initiative. And I could help with the business administration, Marcus offered, a hint of his old confidence returning. My experience dealing with contractors and regulatory bodies could be useful in managing the renovation process. Elizabeth began gathering the documents, her movements deliberate. You have 3 days until the trust becomes irrevocable. That's enough time to file the necessary paperwork and begin preliminary planning. But first, you'll need to make a formal decision about accepting the responsibilities outlined in the trust. I looked at my siblings, seeing in their faces the same mix of determination and hope that I felt. The path ahead would require significant work, careful planning, and ongoing cooperation. Exactly the kind of challenge our grandfather had prepared us for. I accept the role of architectural preservation specialist, I stated firmly, with the understanding that this will be a family endeavor, drawing on all our strengths. Marcus nodded. I'll contact the developers first thing tomorrow to withdraw from the contract. Then we can begin proper planning for the carriage house renovation. And I'll reach out to my department chair about potential collaboration opportunities, Rachel added. The university's resources could be instrumental in establishing the research center. Elizabeth closed her briefcase with a satisfied click. William would be proud to see this, not just the preservation of the property, but the preservation of his most important investment, his family's unity and purpose. As we walked Elizabeth to her car, the late afternoon light cast long shadows across the property. The carriage house stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, its weathered facade holding both history and possibility. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of an enormous undertaking. But for now, we had found something invaluable. A shared vision for the future that honored our past. The next morning found me in the carriage house at dawn, tablet in hand, conducting a detailed architectural assessment. Years of professional experience in Singapore had taught me the importance of thorough preliminary evaluations, especially when dealing with historical structures. The building's bones were sound, just as I'd initially thought, but the challenges ahead became clearer with each room I examined. The old wooden beams overhead bore silent witness to decades of history, their hand-hewn surfaces telling stories of craftsmanship long past. My tablet's laser measuring tool captured precise dimensions as I moved through the space, creating a three-dimensional model that would serve as the foundation for our renovation plans. I brought coffee, Marcus called from the doorway, carefully, navigating around a pile of old trunks. And something else you should see. He handed me a steaming cup and a thick manila envelope. Inside was a letter from Harrison and Associates, confirming their withdrawal from the development contract. No pushback from the developers? I asked, scanning the formal legal language. Marcus managed a rueful smile. Surprisingly, no. Apparently, the existence of a 50-year trust with specific preservation requirements makes the property significantly less attractive for luxury condo conversion. Who would have thought? The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The very legal structure that had frustrated Marcus's development plans was now protecting us from potential complications. As we stood in the dusty morning light, I could see my brother taking in the space with new eyes, not calculating its market value, but considering its potential. The university board approved my proposal, Rachel announced, joining us with her own coffee and a stack of papers. They're interested in establishing a partnership for the research center. The Dean of American Studies is particularly excited about the potential for hands-on historical preservation programs. I pulled up the 3D model I'd been developing on my tablet. Take a look at this. I've been mapping out how we could divide the space to accommodate both research facilities and public areas while maintaining historical integrity. The holographic display projected a detailed rendering of the carriage house's interior, showing proposed modifications highlighted in different colors. Rachel and Marcus leaned in, watching as I rotated the model to show different angles. The main floor could house the research facilities, I explained, zooming in on specific sections. We can preserve the original post and beam construction while incorporating modern amenities. The hayloft area above would make an excellent archive space with proper climate control. What about these side rooms? Marcus asked, pointing to several smaller spaces along the eastern wall. Perfect for individual study areas or small group sessions, Rachel suggested. We could preserve the original windows. The natural light would be ideal for document examination. As we discussed possibilities, a noise from the main house caught our attention. Through the carriage house windows, we could see a group of people gathering on the front lawn. Elizabeth Blackwood's car was parked in the circular drive, along with several other vehicles I didn't recognize. The Historical Commission representatives, Marcus explained, checking his watch. They're here to review our preservation proposals and formally record the trust's activation. We made our way back to the main house, where Elizabeth was already holding court in the library. She had assembled an impressive group, representatives from the Marblehead Historical Society, members of the State Preservation Board, and several architectural historians. "Ah, perfect timing," Elizabeth said as we entered. "We were just discussing the unique nature of the Montgomery Trust and its implications for future preservation projects." One of the architectural historians, Dr. James Chen, turned to me with obvious interest. "Ms. Montgomery, we understand you've been working on significant developments in Singapore. Your perspective on blending historical preservation with modern functionality could be invaluable here." "The challenge," I began, pulling up my preliminary assessments, "lies in honoring the original structure while adapting it for contemporary educational use. Every modification must serve both preservation and practical purposes." For the next 2 hours, we engaged in detailed discussions about preservation standards, educational requirements, and community integration. The Historical Commission representatives were particularly impressed by the Trust's comprehensive approach to maintaining the property's historical integrity while ensuring its ongoing relevance. "This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking preservation model we've been advocating for," Dr. Chen commented, reviewing our initial plans for the carriage house. "Too often, historical properties become static museums, disconnected from contemporary life. This vision of active engagement through education and research could set a new standard." As the meeting concluded, Elizabeth gathered us for one final piece of business. "The trust becomes irrevocable at midnight," she reminded us. "Once activated, your commitment to this vision becomes binding. Are you all prepared for that responsibility?" I looked at my siblings, seeing in their faces the same determination I felt. Marcus had already begun sketching out project timelines and budget allocations, his business acumen now focused on realizing our shared vision. Rachel was deep in discussion with the university representatives, her academic expertise helping shape the research center's future direction. "We're ready," I answered for all of us, "not just to preserve the property, but to bring Grandpa William's vision to life in ways he might never have imagined." As our visitors departed, the 3 of us stood in the library, surrounded by the weight of history and the promise of future possibilities. Through the windows, the carriage house stood waiting, its weathered facade holding both challenges and opportunities. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "when I was pushing for development, I thought I was being practical, choosing progress over preservation. But what we're planning here, this combination of historical integrity and contemporary purpose, this is real progress." Rachel nodded, adding, And we each have a crucial role to play. Our different paths have given us exactly the skills we need to make this work. Looking at the property through my architect's eyes, I could already envision the transformations ahead, not just of buildings, but of purpose and possibility. Grandpa William had left us more than a house. He'd left us a mission that would combine our talents and strengthen our bonds as a family. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time, we were truly ready to build on our legacy, together. 2 weeks into the renovation planning, I discovered something in the carriage house that threatened to derail our entire project. The morning had started routinely enough, with contractors arriving to begin preliminary assessments of the electrical systems. As the lead architect, I had been methodically documenting every aspect of the structure, ensuring our modernization plans wouldn't compromise its historical integrity. The discovery came during an inspection of the foundation. My thermal imaging equipment, typically used for detecting structural weaknesses in Singapore's modern high-rises, revealed an anomaly beneath the carriage house's stone foundation. Further investigation uncovered a previously unknown cellar space, completely absent from all existing architectural plans. "This changes everything," I explained to Marcus and Rachel in an emergency meeting. "The presence of an undocumented basement level could affect our historical certification. We need to halt all work until we can properly assess this space." Marcus reviewed the preliminary reports with his characteristic thoroughness. "The Historical Commission won't like this. Their approval was based on our original assessment. Any significant modifications to the structure's documented features could require a complete review." "There's something else," Rachel added, looking up from her research materials. "According to town records from the 1850s, this area was part of the Underground Railroad network. Several properties along the harbor had hidden cellars used as safe houses. The implications were staggering. What we had thought would be a straightforward historical renovation had suddenly become an archaeological site of potentially national significance. The professional implications alone were daunting. My architectural expertise in modern development hadn't prepared me for managing a historical discovery of this magnitude. "We need to bring in specialists," I decided, already drafting emails on my tablet. "Archaeological surveys, historical documentation experts, structural engineers with experience in preservation work. This requires a completely different approach." Marcus's business mindset immediately grasped the financial implications. The trust's endowment was calculated based on standard renovation costs. This level of specialized work wasn't in our budget projections. "Maybe we don't have to see this as a setback," Rachel suggested, her historian's perspective offering a different view. "This discovery could qualify us for additional preservation grants. The National Historical Society has specific funding programs for Underground Railroad sites." As we discussed options, Elizabeth Blackwood arrived for our scheduled project review. Her expression remained neutral as we explained the situation, but I noticed her glancing repeatedly at an old photograph on the library wall, one showing Grandpa William during the carriage house's initial restoration in 1975. "William Montgomery was many things," she finally said, "but careless was never one of them. If there's an undocumented cellar beneath the carriage house, he knew about it." She opened her briefcase and removed a sealed envelope we hadn't seen before. "He left this with instructions to deliver it if you encountered any structural surprises during the renovation." The letter inside was characteristic of our grandfather: detailed, precise, and remarkably prescient. "To my grandchildren, if you're reading this, you've discovered the carriage house's hidden cellar. Its existence was purposefully omitted from official documentation to protect its historical significance until the right time. The trust includes a separate provision, accessible only upon this discovery, specifically for preserving and documenting this aspect of our property's history. The cellar's preservation requires special consideration. Behind the false panel in my study, you'll find complete documentation of the space, including detailed architectural surveys I conducted in 1975. These materials should help navigate the additional requirements while maintaining historical authenticity. More importantly, this discovery represents an opportunity to contribute to our understanding of a crucial period in American history. The Montgomery property isn't just a family legacy. It's part of our nation's story of courage and resistance. Use these resources wisely. The truth, like our history, reveals itself when we're ready to understand its significance. With faith in your abilities, Grandpa William. The study's false panel revealed exactly what we needed: meticulously detailed surveys, structural assessments, and even preliminary preservation plans. Our grandfather had prepared everything necessary for this moment, anticipating the challenges we would face. This changes our entire approach, I said, examining the architectural drawings with growing excitement. We're not just creating a research center anymore. We're preserving a vital historical site. The educational potential alone is extraordinary. Rachel was already outlining potential research programs. We could develop specialized courses in historical preservation, archaeological techniques, and civil rights history. The university's American Studies department would be incredibly interested in establishing a dedicated research program. Marcus, who had been quietly reviewing the financial documentation, looked up with renewed purpose. The additional funding provision is substantial. Combined with potential grants and educational partnerships, we could create something truly significant here. As we absorbed the implications of this discovery, I realized that our grandfather's legacy went far beyond preserving a family home. He had entrusted us with protecting an important piece of American history, believing that our combined skills, my architectural expertise, Marcus's business acumen, and Rachel's historical knowledge, would be needed for this exact moment. We need to approach this systematically, I said, drawing on years of project management experience. First, we document everything exactly as we found it. Then we bring in the necessary experts and begin developing a comprehensive preservation plan that incorporates both the original research center concept and this new historical element. Elizabeth watched our discussion with evident satisfaction. This is exactly what William hoped for, not just preservation for its own sake, but a deeper understanding of why some things must be protected and revealed at the right time. The months ahead would bring countless challenges as we navigated the complexities of preserving both a family legacy and a historical treasure. But standing in the study, surrounded by our grandfather's careful preparations and our own growing determination, I felt a profound sense of purpose. We weren't just renovating a building anymore. We were uncovering and protecting a story that needed to be told, guided by the foresight of a man who understood that some legacies are worth far more than property values. The discovery of the underground railroad cellar transformed our renovation project into something far more significant than we had initially imagined. 1 month into the detailed archaeological survey, I found myself hosting a meeting that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. The library of Montgomery Manor had become a temporary command center, with preservation experts, historians, and university representatives gathered around our family's antique mahogany table. Dr. Sarah Chen from the National Historical Society's Preservation Department presented her preliminary findings with measured excitement. The architectural features of the cellar align perfectly with documented Underground Railroad safe houses from the 1850s. The ventilation system, the hidden access points, even the method of construction, everything suggests this was a significant way station on the route to freedom. I pulled up the 3D modeling software on the large display screen we'd installed for project meetings. The detailed scan of the cellar space revealed intricate details that even Grandpa William's thorough documentation hadn't captured. The structural integration with the main foundation is remarkable, I explained, highlighting specific features. Whoever designed this understood both architecture and the need for absolute secrecy. Marcus, who had been reviewing funding proposals, looked up with newfound interest. The National Park Service just approved our application for inclusion in the Network to Freedom program. This opens up additional preservation grants and educational funding opportunities. Rachel spread out a collection of 19th century documents on the table. Her research team had uncovered correspondence that shed new light on the property's history. We've identified several coded messages and business letters between the original property owner and known abolitionists. The carriage house's location near the harbor made it an ideal transit point. The weight of this historical significance wasn't lost on any of us. What had started as a family project to preserve our grandparents' home had evolved into an opportunity to protect and share a crucial piece of American history. However, the expanded scope of the project brought new challenges. As the lead architect, I faced the complex task of balancing historical preservation with modern educational requirements. Every decision required careful consideration of multiple factors. The main challenge, I explained to the assembled experts, is creating a research facility that allows scholars and students to study this historical site while ensuring its preservation. We need to make the space accessible without compromising its integrity. Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. There are only a handful of well-preserved underground railroad sites with this level of documentation. The educational potential is extraordinary, but we must proceed with extreme care. Just then, Elizabeth Blackwood entered the library, carrying a weathered leather portfolio we hadn't seen before. "I believe this might help with your current challenges," she said, placing it on the table. "William gave me specific instructions about when to share this particular set of documents. Inside the portfolio, we found detailed architectural drawings dating back to the 1850s, along with modifications proposed but never implemented in the 1970s. Grandpa William had annotated the plans extensively, suggesting ways to preserve the historical features while adapting the space for modern educational use. "He anticipated everything," Marcus murmured, studying the financial projections that accompanied the architectural plans. "Even calculated inflation rates for specialized preservation materials." The discovery of these additional documents proved transformative for our approach. Grandpa William's notes provided invaluable insights into both the historical significance of the site and practical methods for its preservation. As the meeting continued, each expert contributed perspectives that enriched our understanding of the project's potential. Dr. Chen outlined preservation techniques used at other historical sites. University representatives proposed innovative ways to integrate the site into their curriculum. Rachel's research team shared discoveries that would help tell the complete story of the property's role in history. However, one particular challenge remained unresolved. The original ventilation system, crucial to the cellar's historical function, had deteriorated over time. Modern preservation requirements demanded climate control, but traditional methods would compromise the authentic features. Drawing on my experience with sustainable design in Singapore, I proposed a solution. What if we integrate passive ventilation principles with modern climate control? I suggested, quickly sketching a concept. We could preserve the original airflow patterns while meeting conservation standards. The preservation experts leaned forward with interest as I explained the technical details. By combining historical construction methods with contemporary environmental control systems, we could maintain the cellar's authenticity while ensuring its long-term preservation. As the meeting concluded, Elizabeth pulled me aside. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said quietly. "Not just of the preservation work, but of how you've all come together to protect something larger than yourselves." Looking around the library at the assembled experts, each contributing their knowledge to this important project, I understood what she meant. Our family legacy had become a gateway to preserving and sharing a crucial chapter of American history. That evening, after everyone had left, I found Marcus and Rachel in the carriage house, discussing future programming possibilities. The setting. Sun cast long shadows through the old windows, reminiscent of how the space might have looked to those seeking freedom so many years ago. You know, Marcus reflected, when I was focused on development value, I completely missed the real worth of this property. Some things can't be measured in market terms. Rachel nodded, adding, and some legacies are meant to be shared, not just preserved. What we're creating here will help future generations understand both the darkness and the courage in our history. Standing in that historic space, surrounded by both the weight of the past and the promise of the future, I felt a profound sense of purpose. Our grandfather had trusted us with more than just a property. He had entrusted us with the responsibility of ensuring that important stories would continue to be told. The path ahead would require all our skills, dedication, and resourcefulness. But together, we were building something that transcended personal or professional achievement. We were becoming part of a continuing story of preservation, education, and understanding. The Boston Globe article appeared 6 weeks after our discovery of the Underground Railroad cellar. The headline read, "Historic Marblehead Property Reveals Secret Civil War-Era Legacy." Within hours, our quiet renovation project became the focus of intense public interest. News vans lined Harbor Street, and my inbox filled with interview requests from historical societies and preservation organizations across the country. I stood in Grandpa William's study, watching through the window as another television crew set up their equipment on our front lawn. The morning's peace had been replaced by a bustling atmosphere that threatened to overshadow our careful planning and methodical approach. The university's public relations department is fielding calls from major networks, Rachel reported, entering with a stack of messages. They want to do feature stories on the historical significance of the site. The National Park Service is particularly interested in our preservation methods. Marcus arrived moments later, his usual confident demeanor showing signs of strain. The Historical Commission is concerned about the increased attention. They're worried about site security and preservation protocols, and we've received inquiries from several documentary filmmakers. The situation demanded immediate action. Drawing on my experience managing high-profile architectural projects in Singapore, I called an emergency meeting with our core team. Within an hour, the library had transformed into a crisis management center. We need to approach this systematically, I began, addressing the assembled group of preservation experts, university representatives, and family members. Public interest in historical discoveries can be both an opportunity and a challenge. The key is maintaining control of the narrative while protecting the site. Dr. Chen from the National Historical Society nodded in agreement. Similar discoveries have faced comparable challenges. The critical period is these first few weeks when public curiosity is at its peak. Elizabeth Blackwood, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "There's something else you should see." She withdrew another envelope from her seemingly endless supply of Grandpa William's preparations. He anticipated this situation as well. The letter inside revealed yet another layer of our grandfather's foresight. "My dear grandchildren, the discovery of the Underground Railroad connection will inevitably draw public attention. This moment presents both an opportunity and a responsibility. The story of this property is not just ours to protect, it belongs to the larger narrative of American history. I've prepared detailed guidelines for managing public interest while preserving the site's integrity. You'll find them in the blue folder marked Public Relations Protocol in my study's filing cabinet. These guidelines were developed in consultation with preservation experts and media specialists during my own career in historical conservation. Remember, our role is not to own this history, but to ensure it is preserved and shared responsibly. With trust in your judgment, Grandpa William." The protocols he had prepared were comprehensive, covering everything from media access guidelines to educational outreach strategies. Once again, our grandfather had anticipated the challenges we would face and provided tools to address them. Drawing on these guidelines and our combined expertise, we developed a structured approach to managing the public interest. Marcus's business experience proved invaluable in creating a communication strategy that would satisfy media interest while protecting the site's integrity. "We'll establish designated viewing areas," he proposed, marking locations on the property map. "Controlled access points that allow the public to understand the significance of the site without compromising its preservation." Rachel contributed her academic perspective. "We can develop educational materials that provide context for the discovery. The university's Digital Archives department can help create virtual tours and interactive historical resources." As lead architect, I focused on ensuring that the increased attention didn't interfere with our preservation work. "We'll need to adjust our renovation timeline to accommodate public interest while maintaining our conservation standards." We spent the next several hours refining our approach. The plan that emerged combined public education with site preservation in a way that honored both our family legacy and the broader historical significance of the discovery. The following week, we held our first organized press conference in the manor's formal garden. Standing before the assembled media, I felt the weight of responsibility our grandfather had prepared us to carry. "The Montgomery property represents more than just architectural history," I began, conscious of choosing words that would set the tone for future coverage. "It stands as a testament to those who risked everything in the pursuit of freedom, and to those who chose to protect and assist them." Marcus handled the practical aspects, outlining our plans for controlled site access and educational programs. Rachel presented the historical context, helping reporters understand the broader significance of the discovery. Together, we demonstrated a united approach that emphasized responsible stewardship over sensation. The response exceeded our expectations. Historical preservation societies offered support and resources. Educational institutions proposed partnerships. Even the initial media coverage showed remarkable restraint, focusing on the historical significance rather than spectacle. That evening, as the last camera crew packed up their equipment, we gathered in the carriage house cellar. The space felt different now, not just a family secret, but a piece of history we had been entrusted to protect and share. "You know," Rachel said, running her hand along the carefully preserved stone walls, "I think this is what Grandpa William meant about the right time for everything. We're not just preserving a building anymore, we're helping preserve a crucial piece of our national memory." Marcus nodded, adding, "And doing it in a way that balances public interest with historical integrity. That's no small achievement." Looking around at the space that had sparked such intense interest, I understood more clearly than ever the responsibility we had inherited. Our grandfather had prepared us not just to protect a physical property, but to become stewards of something far more valuable: the stories and truths that needed to be preserved for future generations. The challenges ahead would require continued dedication and careful management. But together, we had found a way to honor both our family legacy and our obligation to history itself. In doing so, we had discovered something profound about the true meaning of inheritance, not just what we receive, but what we choose to protect and share with the world. The autumn rain tapped steadily against the library windows as I reviewed the latest architectural assessments. 3 months into our preservation project, the technical challenges of maintaining historical authenticity while creating a functional educational space had become increasingly complex. The morning structural report highlighted concerns about the carriage house's eastern foundation that required immediate attention. As I studied the detailed diagrams, a familiar voice interrupted my concentration. "Eleanor Montgomery?" I looked up to find an elderly gentleman standing in the doorway, leaning on a polished wooden cane. His weathered face carried the dignified bearing of someone who had seen much of history firsthand. "I'm James Richardson," he introduced himself. "Your grandfather and I worked together on historical preservation projects back in the 70s. I read about your discovery in the papers." The name sparked immediate recognition. Grandpa William's journals had mentioned James Richardson numerous times, particularly regarding preservation techniques they had developed together. His expertise in historical restoration was legendary in preservation circles. "Mr. Richardson, please come in." I gestured to a chair. "Your work on the Salem maritime restoration has been a reference point for our current projects." He settled into the leather armchair, his eyes taking in the room with professional assessment. "William was always particular about maintaining this library. I see you've kept it exactly as he designed it." "The entire house is a testament to his preservation philosophy," I agreed. "Though lately we've discovered just how deep that commitment went." Richardson nodded thoughtfully. "The Underground Railroad cellar. William suspected its existence back when he first purchased the property, but he wanted to verify everything before making any announcements. That was his way. Thorough, methodical, always thinking about the long-term implications." Marcus entered the library, carrying a stack of financial records. His expression shifted from business focus to curious interest upon seeing our visitor. "James Richardson, the restoration architect?" "The same," Richardson smiled. "Though these days, I'm more of a historical consultant. Your grandfather and I shared a particular vision about preservation, that it wasn't just about maintaining buildings, but about protecting the stories they contained." Rachel joined us, bringing fresh coffee and her historian's perspective. As we settled into conversation, Richardson shared insights about Grandpa William's early preservation work that added new dimensions to our understanding of the property's significance. "The Montgomery Manor project was different from our other restorations," Richardson explained. "William saw it as more than a personal investment. He was creating a template for how historical properties could remain relevant while preserving their authenticity." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a worn leather notebook. "I found this while organizing my old project files. William gave it to me for safekeeping, said I'd know when it was time to return it to the family." The notebook contained detailed observations about the property's historical features, but more importantly, it revealed the broader vision behind our grandfather's preservation work. His notes outlined a comprehensive approach to historical conservation that went beyond physical restoration. "Your grandfather believed that true preservation required 3 elements," Richardson explained. "Physical conservation of the structure, protection of its historical significance, and adaptation for contemporary relevance. He saw these as equally important aspects of maintaining historical legacy." As we discussed the notebook's contents, Richardson offered valuable insights about our current challenges. His experience with similar projects provided practical solutions to some of our most pressing technical issues. "The foundation concerns you're dealing with," he noted, examining my recent assessments. "We encountered similar problems during the Phillips House restoration. The solution lies in understanding how the original builders worked with natural ground settlement." His expertise proved invaluable as we reviewed our preservation plans. Drawing from decades of experience, he suggested modifications to our approach that would better serve both historical authenticity and modern functionality. "The key," he emphasized, "is finding the balance between preservation and purpose. A historical building that can't serve a contemporary function becomes a museum piece." William understood that the real challenge was keeping history alive and relevant. As the afternoon progressed, our conversation shifted from technical details to deeper considerations about the meaning of preservation. Richardson shared stories about other historical properties that had successfully maintained their significance while adapting to modern needs. "What you're doing here," he observed, "goes beyond standard historical preservation. You're continuing the work William started, not just protecting a building, but ensuring its story continues to teach and inspire." Before leaving, Richardson handed me a sealed envelope he had kept with the notebook. "William left this with specific instructions. He wanted you to have it once you had fully embraced the responsibility of preservation." The letter inside revealed yet another layer, Of our grandfather's vision. My dear Eleanor, by now you've discovered that preservation is more than maintaining structures. It's about protecting the connections between past and present, between physical spaces and human experiences. James Richardson taught me this early in my career, and I've spent decades trying to ensure that Montgomery Manor would serve this larger purpose. The trust you've inherited isn't just a legal document or a set of responsibilities. It's an opportunity to demonstrate how historical preservation can enrich our understanding of both past and present. The technical challenges you face are important, but they serve a greater purpose, keeping meaningful stories alive for future generations. Your architectural expertise, Marcus's business acumen, and Rachel's historical knowledge, these aren't coincidental combinations. I believe that together, you would find ways to protect and share our family's legacy in ways I could only imagine. The future of Montgomery Manor now rests in capable hands. Continue to build on what we've started, but never forget that the greatest preservation work happens when we help others understand why history matters. With pride and confidence, Grandpa William. As the rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, I looked around the library with renewed appreciation. Every preservation decision we had made, every challenge we had faced, was part of a larger narrative that stretched both backward and forward in time. We weren't just restoring a property or protecting historical artifacts. We were continuing a legacy of thoughtful preservation that recognized the vital connection between past and present, between physical spaces and human stories. The path ahead would require continued dedication and innovation, but we now had a clearer understanding of the deeper purpose behind our work. Through careful preservation and thoughtful adaptation, we could ensure that the stories held within these walls would continue to educate and inspire future generations. The first educational tour of Montgomery Manor exceeded all our expectations. 20 graduate students from the university's Historic Preservation program stood in the carriage house cellar, their faces illuminated by carefully designed preservation, lighting that balanced visibility with historical authenticity. As the lead architect, I had worried about maintaining the space's emotional impact while making it accessible for educational purposes. Professor Sarah Mitchell, head of the preservation program, addressed her students with evident enthusiasm. What you're seeing here represents a groundbreaking approach to historical preservation. The Montgomery team has managed to create an educational space that maintains complete historical integrity while incorporating modern preservation technology. The students moved through the space, taking detailed notes on their tablets. Our innovative approach to climate control, which preserved the original ventilation pathways while meeting modern conservation standards, had drawn particular interest from preservation specialists across the country. Marcus, who had initially viewed the property purely in terms of development potential, now spoke with genuine passion about the economic aspects of historical preservation. The key to sustainable historical conservation, he explained to the students, is creating a model that generates sufficient resources for ongoing maintenance while remaining true to the site's educational mission. Rachel's historical research had uncovered connections between the property and several prominent abolitionists, adding crucial context to the site's significance. The documentary evidence suggests that at least 47 individuals passed through this space on their journey to freedom, she shared, indicating the carefully preserved markings on the cellar walls. As the tour concluded, Professor Mitchell pulled me aside. The preservation community has been watching this project closely, she said. Your approach to balancing historical authenticity with educational access could become a model for similar sites across the country. Later that afternoon, we received unexpected visitors. An elderly couple had driven from Virginia after reading about our discovery. The woman, Margaret Tompkins, explained that her great-great-grandmother had passed through a safe house in Marblehead during her journey to freedom. Family stories mentioned a carriage house near the harbor, she said softly, her hand resting on the original stone foundation. Being here, seeing this space preserved so carefully, it makes history real in a way no textbook ever could. Her words reinforced the profound responsibility we had inherited. This wasn't just about preserving a building or maintaining a family legacy. We were protecting a physical connection to crucial historical moments that had shaped countless lives. The impact of our work extended beyond the academic community. Local schools began incorporating visits to Montgomery Manor into their American history curriculum. Community groups requested special tours. Preservation societies from other states sent representatives to study our methods. One morning, I arrived to find a group of architectural students from my old firm in Singapore touring the property. They had specifically requested to study our integration of modern preservation technology with historical structures. Their presence reminded me of how far I had come from designing sleek skyscrapers to preserving historical treasures. "Your grandfather would have loved this," Elizabeth Blackwood remarked, watching the various groups move through the property. He always said historical preservation was about creating bridges between past and present, between different communities, between generations. The increasing public interest brought new challenges. Managing access while protecting the site required constant attention. Marcus developed a sophisticated scheduling system that balanced educational opportunities with preservation needs. Rachel coordinated with various academic institutions to ensure research activities didn't compromise the site's integrity. One particular challenge emerged when a prominent developer proposed creating a historical tourism district around Montgomery Manor. The plan would have brought significant economic benefits to the area, but risked commercializing the site's significance. The decision required careful consideration of our core mission. During a crucial meeting with town officials and development representatives, I found myself channeling Grandpa William's preservation philosophy. "While we appreciate the economic potential," I explained, standing in the library where we had made so many important decisions, "our primary responsibility is to protect this site's historical integrity and educational value. Any development plans must serve that mission, not overshadow it." The developer argued for the economic benefits, but Marcus, once an advocate for similar projects, offered a different perspective. "Historical preservation and commercial success aren't mutually exclusive," he noted, "but they must be properly balanced. Our experience here has shown that maintaining historical authenticity creates its own form of value." Rachel presented research demonstrating how other historical sites had been compromised by excessive commercialization. Our united stance, supported by the preservation community and educational partners, ultimately convinced the town council to maintain stricter zoning protections around historical properties. That evening, as we reviewed plans for expanding our educational programs, I found another note from Grandpa William, tucked inside an old preservation manual. "The true measure of preservation work isn't just in the physical structures we protect, but in the connections we help people make with their own history. Every person who walks through these doors carries away a piece of the story and adds their own understanding to its meaning. Remember that we are not just custodians of buildings, but caretakers of memories, protectors of stories that must continue to be told. The work you're doing creates ripples that extend far beyond these walls, touching lives in ways we may never fully know. Keep building those bridges between past and present, between different communities, between generations. That's the real legacy we're preserving." His words captured perfectly what our preservation work had become. Not just a family project or a professional challenge, but a means of connecting people with important aspects of their shared history. Through careful preservation and thoughtful presentation, we were helping others understand why these stories mattered, why they needed to be protected and shared. The growing impact of our work confirmed that we had chosen the right path, honoring both our family legacy and our broader responsibility to historical preservation. Each new group of visitors, each positive response from the preservation community, each moment of connection with the past reinforced the value of what we were protecting. The email from the National Trust for Historic Preservation arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, 6 months into our renovation project. I had been reviewing the latest preservation reports in Grandpa William's study when the notification appeared on my tablet. The message's contents would significantly alter the scope of our work at Montgomery Manor. "Dear Ms. Montgomery," it began, "we are pleased to inform you that Montgomery Manor has been selected as this year's recipient of the National Preservation Excellence Award for Innovation in Historical Conservation. Your groundbreaking approach to integrating modern preservation technology while maintaining historical authenticity has set new standards in the field." The prestigious award traditionally recognized much larger institutions with decades of preservation experience. For our family project to receive such recognition validated everything we had worked to achieve. However, the award carried additional responsibilities that would test our commitment to Grandpa William's vision. Marcus found me still staring at the email. "The Preservation Board just called," he announced. "They want to feature our conservation methods in their national guidelines for historical property maintenance." Rachel arrived moments later, equally excited. "The university's Board of Trustees approved our proposal. They want to establish a permanent research fellowship program focused on preservation technologies, using Montgomery Manor as the primary study site." As we absorbed these developments, Elizabeth Blackwood appeared in the doorway, carrying what had become a familiar sight, another of Grandpa William's carefully preserved envelopes. He left this with instructions to deliver it when the property received national recognition. The letter inside reflected our grandfather's remarkable foresight. "My dear grandchildren, if you're reading this, your preservation work has gained the attention it deserves. This recognition brings both honor and obligation. The techniques and approaches you've developed must now be shared with the broader preservation community." In my files marked Educational Initiatives, you'll find preliminary plans for a preservation training program I never had the opportunity to implement. Perhaps now is the time to revisit these ideas. Remember that true innovation in preservation comes not from working alone, but from collaboration and shared knowledge. The methods you've developed belong not just to our family, but to everyone, working to protect historical legacies. With pride in your achievements, Grandpa William. The files he referenced contained detailed proposals for a comprehensive preservation training program. Once again, our grandfather had anticipated the next phase of our journey and prepared accordingly. The award ceremony in Washington, D.C. brought together preservation experts from across the country. Standing at the podium, looking out at the assembled professionals who had dedicated their careers to historical conservation, I felt the weight of our responsibility. Montgomery Manor represents more than just successful historical preservation, I began my acceptance speech. It demonstrates how family legacy, professional expertise, and community engagement can combine to protect and share important historical narratives. The subsequent reception became an impromptu planning session, as preservation specialists sought details about our innovative approaches. Marcus fielded questions about sustainable funding models for historical properties. Rachel discussed the integration of academic research with practical preservation work. Dr. James Chen, who had first recognized the significance of our preservation methods, approached with an unexpected proposal. "We'd like to establish a national center for preservation innovation," he explained. "Using Montgomery Manor as a model, we could train the next generation of preservation specialists." The proposal aligned perfectly with Grandpa William's educational initiatives. However, implementing such a program would require significant expansion of our current operations. The decision would impact not just our family, but the entire preservation community. That evening, back in our hotel suite, we carefully considered the implications. "This goes beyond anything we initially planned," Marcus observed, reviewing the proposal details. "We'd be taking on responsibility for shaping preservation practices nationwide." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "But isn't that exactly what Grandpa William prepared us for? Each step we've taken has built toward something larger than ourselves." Looking out at the Capitol's illuminated monuments, each preserved to tell important stories about our nation's history, I realized that our grandfather's vision had always extended beyond our family property. He had seen Montgomery Manor as a catalyst for advancing the entire field of historical preservation. The next morning, before returning to Marblehead, we visited the National Archives. Standing before carefully preserved documents that had shaped our nation's history, we gained new perspective on our own preservation work. Every preserved document, every protected building, every maintained historical site represents a commitment to keeping important stories alive, the chief archivist told us during our tour. What you've achieved at Montgomery Manor demonstrates how innovation can serve that commitment. Returning home, we found the preservation community eagerly awaiting our decision about the training center. The responsibility was daunting, but we had learned that the most meaningful achievements often came from embracing challenges that seemed beyond our initial capabilities. In Grandpa William's study, surrounded by the books and papers that had guided his own preservation work, we made our decision. Montgomery Manor would become not just a preserved historical site, but a center for advancing preservation practices that could benefit historical properties across the country. The work ahead would require everything we had learned and more. But we had discovered that preservation, like family legacy, grew stronger when shared with others who understood its value. Our grandfather had prepared us not just to protect one property, but to contribute to the broader mission of historical preservation. In accepting this expanded role, we honored not only our family legacy, but also the fundamental principle that had guided all our work. Some stories are too important to be lost to time, and their preservation requires both innovation and dedication. 1 year to the day after discovering the hidden cellar, I stood in Montgomery Manor's restored carriage house, watching as the first class of preservation specialists received their certification. The space had been transformed into a state-of-the-art training facility while maintaining its historical integrity, exactly as Grandpa William might have envisioned. The morning light filtered through the restored windows, illuminating the faces of 20 preservation professionals from across the country. Each had completed our intensive 6-month program, learning the innovative techniques we had developed while working on Montgomery Manor. Their presence represented the fulfillment of our grandfather's broader vision for historical preservation. Dr. James Chen, now the academic director of our preservation program, addressed the graduating class. What you've learned here goes beyond technical skills. The Montgomery approach to preservation demonstrates how historical conservation can remain relevant while honoring authenticity. Each of you will take these methods back to your own communities, extending the impact of this work far beyond these walls. Marcus, who had masterfully structured the program's financial model, stood beside me with evident pride. The training center had become self-sustaining through a combination of grants, educational partnerships, and carefully managed historical tourism. His business expertise had created a framework that other preservation sites could replicate. Rachel's historical research program had expanded beyond our initial expectations. Universities across the country now sent graduate students to study. Her methodology for integrating historical documentation with preservation work. The library, once simply our grandfather's study, had become a respected research center for preservation studies. As the ceremony concluded, Elizabeth Blackwood approached with what we now knew would be the final envelope from our grandfather. William left this to be opened when his vision for preservation education was fully realized, she explained, her eyes bright with emotion. The letter inside carried his last message to us. My dearest grandchildren, seeing the property transformed into a center for preservation education would bring me more joy than you can imagine. But the true achievement lies not in the building's restoration or the programs you've developed, but in how you've worked together to create something meaningful. Eleanor, your architectural expertise has advanced preservation techniques in ways I could only dream about. Marcus, your business acumen has created a model for sustainable historical conservation that others can follow. Rachel, your dedication to historical accuracy ensures that the stories we protect will be told truthfully and completely. Together, you've demonstrated that preservation is not about freezing the past in time, but about keeping history alive and relevant for future generations. The skills you've developed, the methods you've pioneered, and the knowledge you've shared will influence historical conservation long after we're gone. Remember that every preserved building, every protected artifact, every documented story represents a thread in the fabric of our shared history. By teaching others to protect these treasures, you multiply the impact of our work exponentially. The property deed that caused such concern at the beginning was never about ownership. It was about stewardship. You've proven yourselves to be worthy stewards not just of Montgomery Manor, but of the larger mission of historical preservation. My final wish is that you continue to build on this foundation, always remembering that our greatest achievements come when we help others preserve and protect the stories that matter. With eternal gratitude and pride, your loving grandfather, William Montgomery. As I finished reading the letter aloud, a respectful silence fell over the assembled graduates. The morning sun had reached the angle that illuminated the historical features we had worked so carefully to preserve, creating the same pattern of light that had first led us to the hidden cellar. Looking at the faces around me, preservation, professionals eager to apply their new knowledge, academics excited about future research possibilities, community members proud of their connection to this historical site, I understood the full scope of what we had achieved. Marcus gestured toward the graduating class. Each of them will take what they've learned here and apply it to preservation projects in their own communities. The impact of our work will multiply through their efforts. Rachel nodded in agreement. And their success will inspire others to value and protect historical properties. It's exactly the kind of ripple effect Grandpa William envisioned. The property that had once been the source of family conflict had become a catalyst for advancing historical preservation across the country. Our grandfathers' carefully preserved documents, strategic planning, and unwavering faith in our abilities had guided us toward creating something far more significant than we had initially imagined. As the graduates departed to begin their own preservation journeys, I remained in the carriage house, thinking about the path that had led us here. What had started as a dispute over property ownership had evolved into a mission that combined professional excellence, family cooperation, and community benefit. The deed that Marcus had initially claimed now seemed almost insignificant compared to what we had built together. Our true inheritance hadn't been the property itself, but the opportunity to contribute to the field of historical preservation in meaningful and lasting ways. Elizabeth joined me for a final moment of reflection. William always said that the best legacies are the ones that grow beyond their original boundaries, she remarked. He would be proud to see how you've expanded, his vision while staying true to its core purpose. Standing in the preserved space that had sparked our journey, surrounded by the evidence of both historical significance and future potential, I felt profound gratitude for our grandfather's foresight. He had understood that the most valuable inheritance isn't measured in property or possessions, but in the opportunity to contribute to something larger than ourselves. The sun reached its midday position, illuminating the entire carriage house in clear, steady light. Tomorrow would bring new preservation challenges, fresh opportunities for innovation, and additional chances to share our knowledge with others. But today, we could appreciate how far we had come and acknowledge the truth that had guided our entire journey. The most meaningful legacies are the ones we build together, preserve carefully, and share generously with others. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.